My name is Rebecca Davis, and at 48 years old, I find myself sitting alone in my quiet kitchen, surrounded by the warm, comforting smells of Thanksgiving dinner. As I stir the gravy, I can't help but reflect on how my life has unfolded, how every chapter seemed to lead to this moment. I've spent my life taking care of everyone, ensuring my family's needs were always met, making sacrifices that seemed to go unnoticed, and putting aside my own dreams and desires to keep the peace. But the truth I've come to realize is this: I've been living a life defined by others. And now, betrayal has crept into my life in the most unexpected of ways. It wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with a warning. No, it arrived quietly, like a whisper in the dark when I least expected it. I never thought it would come from my own daughter. Sarah, my only child, the one I'd raised with so much love and care, the one who had once looked at me with admiration. But now, sitting here, I realize that the distance between us has grown so wide, I'm not sure how we'll ever close the gap. And that feeling, that betrayal from the people you love most, is a unique kind of pain. Thanksgiving had always been important to us. It was a tradition I held on to tightly, even after my divorce from William. Our marriage had ended 6 years ago, but the years we spent together were a part of my history, a part of who I was. William and I had shared so much: a home, a family, a life, or so I thought. When William left for Lydia, his much younger colleague from work, I was blindsided. He walked away without much of a fight, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our lives, trying to figure out how to move forward. I'd never seen it coming, the way he abandoned not just me, but our family, for someone half his age. And, to make matters worse, he made sure to take as much as he could with him: the money, the assets, everything we'd built together. I was left with the house in the suburbs and an aching sense of loss. The house, which I had turned into a home, felt too big and too quiet without him. I didn't know how to fill the emptiness that came with him leaving, but I managed. I had to, for Sarah's sake, if nothing else. Over the years, I'd learned to cope. William moved on, and I tried to do the same. We maintained a somewhat civil relationship for Sarah's benefit, but it was never the same. I didn't know who I was anymore without him, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. But I couldn't stay in the past. I had to keep going for her. For me. The day had started like any other Thanksgiving. I spent hours in the kitchen, rolling out pie dough, preparing the stuffing, and roasting the turkey. My hands, stiff with arthritis, moved through the motions, as I'd done so many times before. Cooking had always been my way of showing love. My love for my family, my love for tradition. And so, even as my joints protested, I carried on, determined to make this holiday one of warmth and comfort. The thought of gathering my family around the table, of feeling that connection again, was the only thing that kept me going. My phone buzzed on the counter. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I wiped my hands on my apron before picking up the phone, my heart lightening at the sound of her voice. "Hey, Mom, just checking in about dinner. We're bringing the mashed potatoes, and Ben is excited to see everyone." "Sounds great, sweetheart. Dinner's at 5, just like usual," I replied, smiling as I adjusted the turkey in the oven. "Oh, and Dad said he'd be coming a little earlier. Says he has some papers for you to sign. He said it's nothing big." I froze. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Papers? What papers? William and I hadn't discussed anything in weeks. We had been co-owners of the cottage in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the one place that had remained untouched by the pain of our divorce. It was our family retreat, the one spot that still held the good memories. But papers? We hadn't talked about anything involving the cottage since the divorce settlement. What could he possibly need me to sign? What papers? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, neutral. Something about the land. He said it's for some development deal. I think it's just a formality. They need both signatures, and it'll be quick." My stomach tightened. The cottage. They were selling it. Why hadn't I been told about this? Why hadn't William mentioned it before? The more I thought about it, the more upset I became. This was my family's history: the lake, the trees, the little cottage that had witnessed so many summers of joy. And now William was trying to sell it without even consulting me? Without even asking me how I felt about it? That's when the feeling of betrayal hit hardest. I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Tell him 3 p.m., I said, my voice lower than I intended. "I'll be ready." Okay. Oh, and Mom, Ben might be bringing someone. I think she's just a friend, but you'll meet her when we get there. Okay? I nodded, though I felt my stomach churn with unease. A friend? Who was this person? Why hadn't Sarah told me about her sooner? Something didn't feel right. Something in my gut told me I was about to walk into a situation that I wasn't prepared for. I hung up the phone and leaned against the counter, my thoughts racing. My family, the people I'd spent my life loving and giving to, were slipping away from me, piece by piece, and I couldn't stop it. I wasn't sure if I even knew how to. The doorbell rang a few minutes before 3 p.m. I opened the door to find William standing on my porch, looking as polished as ever in his expensive suit, his hair combed neatly. He looked like he hadn't aged a day since we divorced. At 52, he still carried himself with the same air of superiority he had when we were married. His smile was that practiced, fake one I had come to know all too well, the one that said he was hiding something and hoping I wouldn't notice. "Rebecca," he said, his voice dripping with forced cheer. "You look great. Still got that spunk, huh?" He stepped past me without waiting for a response, as though he belonged here. I didn't invite him in. I stepped aside, letting him walk into my house as if it were still his. It wasn't. Not anymore. "So, about those papers," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "What's going on?" William didn't waste time with pleasantries. "It's just a formality," he said, pulling a thick envelope from his briefcase. "The developers need both of our signatures for the land. You know, the cottage. They're putting in a golf course, condos, the whole thing. Big deal. They've offered a great price. Enough to set you up for the rest of your life." I stopped dead in my tracks. "What do you mean? They're selling it?" The room suddenly felt too small, suffocating. "We've never discussed selling the cottage. Why didn't you talk to me about this?" William gave me that look, the one that always made me feel small. "I thought Donald would have mentioned it. We've been talking about it for months. This is just business, Rebecca. You knew it was coming." I shook my head, feeling the ground shift beneath me. "No, I didn't know. I didn't know a thing about it." His jaw tightened, but he was already looking past me, thinking about the next step. "Look, the sale's already in motion. It'll be easier if you just sign today. Everything's already set up." I stood there, rooted to the spot. This wasn't just business. This was betrayal. The last thread of our shared history. Gone. The dinner went on as planned, but the warmth I had always felt at Thanksgiving was gone. Instead, there was tension in every corner of the room, the air thick with unspoken words. The dinner went on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Everyone seemed to move in slow motion, their voices distant, as if I were watching the whole scene unfold from behind a foggy glass. The turkey was placed in the center of the table, the mashed potatoes and green beans were passed around, but none of it tasted the same. The conversation felt hollow, full of small talk that didn't touch anything real. William, Lydia, and Sarah were there, but it was as if I was on the outside looking in. For the first time, I felt the chasm that had formed between us, one that no amount of holiday dinners could bridge. Sarah, my daughter, the person I had spent years raising, was seated across from me, her eyes a little too bright. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of someone who had learned to fake it, to put on a mask for appearances. Beside her was her boyfriend, Ben, a man I hadn't met until today. He seemed nice enough, but his presence only highlighted how much had changed since my divorce. There was a subtle discomfort in the air, the kind you don't talk about, but you can feel deep down in your gut. As I served the mashed potatoes, I noticed Ben glancing at his phone every few minutes, a hint of nervousness in his demeanor. I didn't want to make assumptions, but I couldn't help but wonder if there was more going on than they were letting on. And then there was Donald. My son, my flesh and blood, the one I had poured my heart into raising. He sat beside William, a little too close, as if he were seeking approval or validation. Donald had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my eyes, but lately I felt a growing distance between us. He seemed more like a stranger than the boy I once knew. He and William exchanged knowing glances, their conversations filled with a kind of unspoken language that I wasn't a part of. I couldn't tell if it was the years of estrangement or the weight of betrayal that had started to erode our relationship, but the bond between us felt thin, fragile. "Mom, I think you'll like the wine I brought," Donald said, raising his glass. "It's from that vineyard in Napa you always wanted to visit." I forced a smile, trying to push down the knot in my stomach. "That's sweet of you, Donald. I'm sure it's lovely." But my words felt empty. They didn't carry the warmth or affection I once had for him. The reality of how much things had changed in such a short time settled over me like a heavy fog. I had always tried to make everything perfect for my family, always ensured that they felt loved, but in return, I had been met with silence, indifference, and now, betrayal. And I couldn't help but wonder how much of it was my fault for letting it all happen, for not speaking up sooner, for not demanding more for myself. The conversation shifted, and for a moment I was distracted by the clink of silverware and the murmur of voices around me. But then Sarah, as if sensing my growing discomfort, dropped a bombshell. "So, Ben and I have some news," she said, her voice hesitant, her fingers playing with the napkin in her lap. "We're planning to move to Switzerland." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I had suspected something was off, but this was a blow I wasn't prepared for. Switzerland, so far away, so final. I had spent years doing everything I could for Sarah, guiding her, supporting her, and now she was leaving. Not just physically, but emotionally. I had always feared this day would come, but hearing it out loud made it all too real. "Switzerland?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "When? Why?" "It's a great career opportunity for Ben," she replied, her eyes flicking to him, seeking reassurance. "And you know, I've been thinking about it for a while. I think it's time for a change." I looked at her, the daughter I had given everything for, and felt the pang of hurt deep inside me. How had I not seen this coming? How had I missed the signs that she was slipping away from me, inch by inch? It wasn't just the physical distance of moving away, it was the emotional gulf that had been widening between us for years. I had spent so much time trying to make my family whole again, trying to keep the pieces together, but I had failed. I had failed them, and in the process, I had lost myself. "I see," I said, my voice flat. I forced a smile, but it felt brittle, as though it might shatter at any moment. "Well, I'm happy for you, Sarah. I really am." But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. I wasn't happy for her. I wasn't happy for any of them. I was angry. Angry at William, at Donald, at Sarah, and most of all, I was angry at myself. Why had I let them do this to me? Why had I stood by, always putting their needs first while mine were ignored? Why had I allowed them to make decisions for me without ever asking what I wanted or needed? And then, as if to pour salt in the wound, Donald added, "We were thinking that the proceeds from the cottage sale could really help us with the move. You know, for the wedding and everything." The room seemed to tilt, the words cutting through the air like a sharp knife. The cottage. The one place that had remained a part of me, untouched by the bitterness of our past. And now they were planning to sell it, to use my share of it for their own needs, without so much as a conversation with me. This was the last straw. The betrayal was complete. I stood up suddenly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The turkey sat untouched in the center of the table, the mashed potatoes growing cold. The rest of the family looked up in surprise, but I didn't care. I couldn't sit there any longer, pretending that everything was fine. "This is enough," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "This has gone far enough." William sneered from across the room. "What are you going to do, Rebecca? You don't have a leg to stand on." I turned to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. "You think you can just take everything from me, don't you, William? The cottage, my daughter, my dignity. You think I'll just sit here and let you have your way? Well, you're wrong." I walked over to the desk and pulled out the papers I had prepared in secret, the trust documents, the forged deed I'd had transferred into my name 3 years ago, the legal documents I had gathered, knowing this moment would come. "I'm done letting you control my life," I said, sliding the papers across the table toward him. "The cottage is mine. Not yours, not Sarah's, mine." For the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of surprise in William's eyes. But it was too late. The game had changed, and I was no longer playing by his rules. The room fell silent. I stood there, facing my family, feeling the weight of years of quiet sacrifice lifting from my shoulders. This was my moment, my turning point. I've spent my whole life putting you first, I said, my voice steady now. But no more. The time for that is over. I turned to leave, knowing that I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, my peace, and my power. The days following that Thanksgiving dinner were a blur, a mix of frantic phone calls, legal consultations, and sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I had expected the emotional fallout from my confrontation with William and Donald, but I wasn't prepared for how deeply it would cut. They'd underestimated me, and now I was forcing them to face the consequences of their actions. It wasn't just about the cottage anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my autonomy, and my dignity. After the dinner, I retreated into the quiet of my home. The house felt too big, too empty without the warmth of family around the table. But in that silence, I found something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. I had spent too much time playing the role of the dutiful mother and ex-wife, always putting their needs above my own. It was time to stop, time to take control. The next morning, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table, going through the legal documents I had kept hidden for months. When William had left me, I'd been forced to think ahead, to prepare for a future that didn't include him. He had taken everything I had worked for, the assets, the house, but there was one thing I hadn't given up: the lake cottage. I'd known deep down that William would come for it eventually, that he would try to sell it without consulting me, just as he had done with so many other parts of our lives. So, I had made sure the property was transferred solely to my name 3 years ago. I didn't tell anyone, not even Sarah. It had been my insurance, my way of ensuring that the one thing that still felt like a home would be mine, no matter what. I had always prided myself on being self-sufficient, on being the one who held everything together, even when the cracks started to show. But I had allowed myself to believe that William's departure had been the worst of it. Now, I could see that I had been wrong. The real betrayal had come from within my own family, from my son, Donald, and my daughter, Sarah, the very people I had given everything for. I felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. I spent hours drafting the letter to my lawyer, Harriet Winders, a woman I'd known since college. I had chosen her not only because of her reputation as a fierce litigator, but because she was the only person I trusted to handle this mess with the care and discretion it required. Harriet had always been the more pragmatic one, the one who saw things clearly when everyone else was too caught up in emotions. And right now, that was exactly what I needed. I called her office and set up a meeting for the following day. As I hung up the phone, a sense of determination washed over me. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I wasn't going to let William or Donald or anyone else manipulate me any longer. This was my turn. I was taking back control. When I walked into Harriet's office the next afternoon, I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me. The sleek, modern building, the polished floors, and the professional atmosphere all seemed so far removed from the world I had known. But Harriet, always calm and composed, greeted me with a warm smile, as though nothing had changed. "Rebecca," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "It's good to see you." I sat down, the papers in my bag heavy with significance. "I need your help," I said, my voice firm. "I need to make sure they can't touch the cottage or anything else. I've had enough of them taking what's mine." Harriet nodded, her expression serious. "Tell me everything. We'll get this sorted." And so I did. I told her about the phone call with Sarah, the confrontation at dinner, and how William had tried to sell the property without consulting me. I explained how I had secretly transferred the cottage into my name 3 years ago, and how I had kept the paperwork hidden. Harriet listened attentively, taking notes as I spoke. When I finished, she looked up at me with a new resolve in her eyes. "This isn't going to be easy, Rebecca," she said. "But you've done the right thing by preparing. I'll make sure William doesn't get a penny from that property, and I'll help you secure everything you're entitled to. We'll take this to court if we have to." For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. Harriet was the one person I could count on to help me navigate this battle, and with her by my side, I knew I could stand my ground. Over the next week, things moved quickly. Harriet worked tirelessly to prepare the necessary legal documents, ensuring that my claim to the cottage was ironclad. I was amazed by her efficiency and expertise. As much as I hated to admit it, I was also grateful for the protection I had put in place all those years ago. The paperwork I had hidden was my shield, and now it was finally time to use it. Meanwhile, the tension with my family only grew. Donald had called several times, but I hadn't answered. I wasn't ready to talk to him, not yet. He had betrayed me in the worst way, and I needed distance to process it all. Sarah had also reached out, her voice full of apologies, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. How could she have supported this? How could she have let her father and brother manipulate me so easily? I couldn't make sense of it. And then there was William. He hadn't contacted me directly since that day at Thanksgiving, but I knew he was scheming behind the scenes. He always had been, always looking for ways to control me, to take what wasn't his. But this time it was different. This time, I wasn't going to let him. The day the legal papers were ready, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. I was done being the quiet, accommodating wife and mother. I had spent so many years making excuses for them, for their behavior. I had kept my head down, ignored the warning signs, and allowed them to dictate the course of my life. But not anymore. I signed the documents, handed them over to Harriet, and watched as she made the necessary copies. This was it. This was my stand. Later that evening, as I sat alone in my living room, I felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. I had done it. I had taken control of my life, and I was no longer going to allow them to make decisions for me. They had pushed me too far. But in this moment, as the weight of the situation settled in, I realized something profound. This was the beginning of a new chapter for me, one where I would no longer be the one who always gave in, the one who always put everyone else's needs first. For the first time in years, I was free, and I would fight, if necessary, to keep it that way. The following days passed in a haze of paperwork and phone calls, each one pushing me further into a world I hadn't been prepared for. As I sat at my kitchen table, sorting through the legal files Harriet had sent over, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a fight over property or money. It was about everything I had put up with over the years, all the sacrifices, the quiet suffering, and the moments I had let slip by, thinking that family would always come first. Now, I had come to understand that my family's definition of coming first meant taking whatever they wanted, leaving me with nothing but the remnants of my own life to piece together. William's silence was the hardest part. I had expected him to call to try and convince me to change my mind, to argue that selling the cottage was a practical decision. But instead, he remained eerily quiet, likely consulting his lawyers, preparing for the inevitable legal battle. And then there was Donald, who had been avoiding me ever since our confrontation. He must have known I was serious now. I wasn't going to let him off the hook so easily. My heart ached when I thought about how much he had changed, how much he had distanced himself from the mother who had given everything for him. As I stared at the stack of papers, I realized how much my world had shifted in the past week. Every step I took felt like a push against a force I had spent so many years accommodating. But I was tired. Tired of being the one who always bent, who always said yes, who always made the difficult compromises. Now I was saying no. I was standing up for myself in a way I hadn't done in decades. I had called Harriet the day after I signed the trust documents. The legal strategy was set in motion. She assured me that we were on the right track, that William would have no legal grounds to contest my claim to the lake house. But still, I could feel the weight of the storm gathering. There was a part of me that feared what they would do next, how far they would go to get what they wanted. I had already seen how easily they manipulated me, and the thought that they might try something even more underhanded kept me on edge. The phone rang the next morning, and I recognized the number immediately. It was Donald. I had been avoiding his calls for days, but this time I picked up. "Mom," he said, his voice low, almost uncertain, "we need to talk." My stomach twisted. "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady, but I could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "I know you're upset," he said quickly, "but we didn't mean for things to go this far. I'm sorry for what happened at dinner. I don't want us to be like this, Mom." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to hold back the flood of emotions that his words triggered. "You don't get to apologize now, Donald," I said, my voice hardening. You've been a part of this, all of it. You've chosen your side, and it wasn't mine. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, the weight of the conversation hanging between us. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Mom. It's just, things have changed. You don't get it. The cottage, the money, it's all tied up in what's best for all of us. For Sarah, for me, for the future. Best for you? I snapped. It's always been about what's best for you, hasn't it? You and your father. What about what's best for me, Donald? Have you ever stopped to think about that? He sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. I just don't want to fight with you, okay? We're a family. I don't want to lose you over this. You've already lost me, Donald, I said, the words feeling like a dagger to my heart. And it's not just about the cottage. It's everything. The way you've sided with William, the way you've let him manipulate you, and the way you've allowed him to manipulate me. I didn't know, he said quickly. I didn't realize how bad it was. I just wanted to do what was best, but I can see now how wrong I've been. I can see that. Please, Mom, let's fix this. The pain in his voice almost made me want to soften, to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I couldn't. Not anymore. You want to fix it? I asked, my voice trembling. You can start by standing up to your father, by taking responsibility for your part in this. That's how you start to fix it. I will. I promise, he said, the sincerity in his voice almost making me believe him. But I had learned the hard way that promises didn't mean much when they came from people who had already shown you how easily they would break your heart. I ended the call, my fingers trembling on the phone, and I stared out the window at the sprawling landscape outside my house. The trees were shedding their leaves, the colors of autumn dancing across the yard. It was beautiful, but all I could feel was the weight of everything that had happened. My family, the people I had spent so much of my life trying to protect, were unraveling before my eyes, and I was the one left holding the pieces. The days that followed were filled with more calls, more meetings with Harriet, and more legal preparations. Each step felt like a battle, but I wasn't going to back down. I couldn't. For the first time in years, I was doing something for me. I was fighting for what was mine, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me again. As the week drew to a close, I found myself at the lake house, standing on the porch and looking out over the water. The lake, with its quiet beauty, had always been a place of peace for me, a place where I could breathe and remember who I was before everything got so complicated. Now it was a symbol of everything I was fighting for. My family had tried to strip it away from me, just like they had tried to strip away my sense of self, my dignity. But I wouldn't let them. I had spent too long allowing them to control me, to dictate my choices. But now, standing there in the quiet of the evening, with the sun setting behind the mountains, I knew I had finally taken back control. This was my life, my future, and I was going to fight for it. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, I made a promise to myself. A promise that no matter what happened next, I would no longer be the victim. I would no longer let them dictate my happiness. I would stand strong, no matter the cost, and I would win. The days stretched into weeks, and I found myself in a strange limbo, waiting for the inevitable fallout. The tension between my family and me was palpable, hanging in the air like smoke that wouldn't dissipate. My phone rang almost constantly, but I found myself avoiding the calls. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear from them. It was that I didn't know what I would say. What was there left to say after everything that had happened? The more I thought about it, the more I realized there was nothing left to salvage. They had made their choices, and now it was my turn to make mine. It wasn't easy. As much as I told myself I was doing the right thing, there were moments when I felt the weight of the years I had spent trying to hold my family together. I had spent so much of my life making myself small, doing everything I could to make sure they were happy, even at the cost of my own peace. It had been my life's work, or so I thought. But now, as I sat in my quiet living room, I couldn't help but wonder what my life could have been if I had ever taken the time to put myself first. I looked around the same room where I had spent countless hours with my family, making holiday meals, giving advice, helping with homework, holding them when they were sick or upset. It was hard to reconcile that woman, the mother who always gave and gave, with the woman I was becoming, the one who was finally learning to say no. But it was necessary. I had to learn to protect myself, even if it meant losing them in the process. Harriet had been my rock throughout all of this. She was methodical, no nonsense, and always had a clear plan. When we first started working together, she had laid out the strategy for taking back the lake house and making sure William couldn't claim any of it. At the time, I didn't think I needed it. I thought it was just a precaution, just a way to ensure I had control over one piece of my life that was still mine. But now, as the reality of the situation set in, I realized how crucial Harriet's guidance had been. She had helped me set up a trust, one that would make sure that the property and everything I worked for would stay in my hands, no matter what William tried to do. The more I dug into the legal aspects of it all, the more I realized just how much William had tried to take from me over the years. It wasn't just the cottage, it was everything. The way he had manipulated the finances during the divorce, the way he had hidden assets, the way he had used our family as pawns in a game of control. It was clear to me now that this wasn't just about property or money. It was about power. He had always wanted to control me, to make me feel small, and for so many years, I had let him. But I wasn't going to let him win anymore. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was personal. The next big step came when we had to decide whether to go to court. Harriet and I had discussed the options, and while I wanted to avoid the drama of a public battle, I knew I couldn't let them get away with this. I couldn't let William walk away without facing the consequences of his actions. And so, we made the decision to proceed. The papers were filed, and the clock started ticking. I had never been a litigious person. I had always believed in handling things quietly and keeping things behind closed doors, out of sight. But that was the old me. The new me understood that sometimes, in order to reclaim what's rightfully yours, you have to fight for it. And fight I did. The process was grueling. Constant meetings with Harriet, filing additional paperwork, responding to William's legal team's attempts to twist the narrative. But I pushed through. The more I did, the more I realized how capable I truly was. But it wasn't just the legal battle that was weighing on me. It was the emotional toll. The strain of knowing that my own son had sided with William, had allowed himself to be manipulated into betraying me, hurt more than I had anticipated. I tried to tell myself that it was just business, that Donald didn't really understand what was happening, but deep down, I knew he had made a choice, and that hurt. I hadn't heard from him in days, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear from him again. There were moments when I missed him, when I missed the son I had raised, the boy who had once looked up to me with love and admiration. But that boy was gone, replaced by someone who had chosen his father's side, who had chosen money and security over loyalty and truth. It was hard to reconcile that, to look at the son I had loved so fiercely, and realize that the person he had become was someone I didn't recognize. Sarah had called a few times, too. I hadn't answered her calls, not because I didn't want to hear from her, but because I didn't know what to say. What could I say? She was part of this, too. She had stood by, allowing William and Donald to make decisions about my life without me. She hadn't fought for me, and that hurt more than anything. I had spent my life sacrificing for her, making sure she had everything she needed, everything she wanted. And now she was standing on the sidelines, watching as I fought for myself, unsure if she was going to support me or not. But then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, as I was sitting in my study, sorting through more legal documents, I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, there stood Sarah, her face pale, her eyes filled with regret. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" I looked at her, unsure of what to say. My heart ached, but I didn't know if I was ready to forgive her. "What is it, Sarah?" She took a deep breath, her hands wringing nervously. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what happened, and I know I failed you. I've been so caught up in my own life, in my own plans, that I didn't stop to think about what you needed. And for that, I'm so sorry." I stood there, unsure of how to react. A part of me wanted to pull her into my arms and tell her everything was okay. But the other part of me, the part that had spent so long keeping everything together, felt too broken to do that. She had betrayed me too. She had chosen them over me. But in that moment, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Remorse. True remorse. I don't know what to say, Sarah, I said quietly. I need time. I need to figure out what this all means, what we all mean to each other. I've been fighting for so long, for you, for all of you, but now I need to fight for myself. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I see what you've done, and I see how much you've sacrificed. And I'm sorry. I'll support you, whatever you decide. I just want you to know that I'm here. It wasn't the apology I had hoped for, but it was a start. It was a crack in the wall that had been built between us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. As I watched her walk away, I realized something. This wasn't just about legal battles or money. It was about healing, about forgiving, even when it felt impossible. It was about finding a way forward, one step at a time, even if that meant taking the long road. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The fight wasn't over, but maybe, just maybe, I was starting to find my way back to the life I deserved. The following weeks felt like a whirlwind. Every day seemed to blend into the next, filled with meetings, phone calls, and moments of introspection that I wasn't prepared for. The battle for the cottage had taken a life of its own, and with each legal step we took, I could feel the weight of it settling on my shoulders, heavier than I had anticipated. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about reclaiming a piece of my life that had been taken from me. My autonomy, my identity, and my peace. I had never been one to back down from a challenge, but this was something different. This wasn't just about property or money. It was about my very essence. My family, the people I had loved so deeply and selflessly, had turned on me. And for the first time in my life, I had to learn how to put myself first. It was an exhausting, uncomfortable process, but it was necessary. The tension with William and Donald was palpable. Every time I picked up the phone, I braced myself for another confrontation. But it wasn't just them anymore. Sarah had been quiet for days after our conversation. I wasn't sure if she was giving me space or if she was just trying to figure out where she stood. She hadn't called since our talk, and part of me couldn't help but wonder if I had lost her too. Had I made the right choice in confronting her the way I did? The guilt ate at me, but I couldn't go back. I couldn't undo what had already been done. The phone call that came 2 weeks after our last conversation was a surprise. It was Sarah, and her voice sounded different, softer, almost tentative. "Mom?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Can we talk?" I hesitated for a moment, not sure how to respond. Part of me still wanted to protect myself, to keep my distance until I knew where she truly stood. But another part of me, the part that had always loved her unconditionally, knew I couldn't shut her out forever. Not when there was still a chance for reconciliation. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my tone calm, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. "What's on your mind?" She sighed on the other end, and I could almost hear the weight of the words she was about to say. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Mom, about everything. About Dad, about Donald, about me. I've been so caught up in my own life, in my own plans, that I never stopped to think about what you were going through. And I see that now. I've been selfish, and I'm sorry." Her apology, though long overdue, hit me like a wave. Part of me wanted to forgive her immediately, to let go of the hurt and move on. But another part of me, the part that had been deeply wounded by her silence, held back. It wasn't that I didn't want to forgive her. It was that I needed to see more than just words. I needed to know that she understood the depth of the betrayal, not just to me, but to herself as well. "I appreciate your apology, Sarah," I said softly, trying to keep my emotions in check. "But words aren't enough anymore. You can't just say sorry and expect everything to go back to the way it was. This has been hard on me, on all of us, and I need you to show me that you're truly ready to make things right." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, steadying herself. "I know, Mom. I don't expect everything to be okay right away, but I want to try. I'm here for you. I want to make it right." Her words were simple, but there was sincerity in them that I hadn't heard before. It wasn't enough to heal the wounds overnight, but it was a start. a small, fragile start, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. I don't know what the future holds for us, Sarah, I said, my voice quiet but steady. But I'm willing to try, too. We both have a lot of work to do, but we can figure it out, one step at a time. After we ended the call, I sat in silence for a while, letting her words settle over me. It felt like the first genuine connection I'd had with her in a long time. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I felt a shift. The walls I had built around myself were beginning to crumble, piece by piece, and though it was painful, I knew it was necessary. If I was going to heal, if I was going to move forward, I had to allow myself to be vulnerable again. The legal battle continued to drag on. William's lawyers were relentless, trying every tactic they could think of to pressure me into signing the cottage over to him. They tried to argue that my claim was invalid, that I was simply trying to hold on to a piece of property that no longer had any real value. But they underestimated me. They underestimated the years of preparation I had put into ensuring that this moment, the moment when I would finally take a stand, was possible. Harriet remained by my side through it all, guiding me with her steady hand. The truth was on my side, and I knew it. The transfer of the cottage to my name was legitimate, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. Not now, not after everything I had fought for. But still, the emotional toll weighed on me. Every court appearance, every legal exchange, felt like I was walking through a battlefield. And in a way, I was. But it was a battle I was determined to win, no matter how long it took. One afternoon, as I sat in my study, going over more legal papers, the phone rang again. This time it was Donald. I hadn't spoken to him since our last confrontation, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to talk to him. But something in me, something deep down, told me that it was time. I took a deep breath before answering. "Donald," I said, my voice calm, though my heart was racing. "What is it?" "I just wanted to check in, Mom," he said, his voice tentative. "I know things have been difficult, but I want you to know I'm thinking about you. And I realize now how much I've hurt you. I'm sorry for what I did." I closed my eyes, trying to process his words. I had expected him to apologize, but hearing it from him, after everything that had happened, made it feel real. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe he could understand, that maybe he could be the son I once knew. "I appreciate the apology, Donald," I said, my voice softening. "But just like with Sarah, it's not enough. I need to see that you're truly committed to making things right." There was a long pause. "I get it, Mom. I do. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, but I want to try. I want to be here for you." For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of peace. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy. We all had a lot of work to do. But in that moment, I realized something. I was ready to start healing. Not just for me, but for my family too. And maybe, just maybe, I could learn to trust again. The weeks that followed felt like both a blur and a lifetime. I was still deep in the throes of the legal battle, but now there was something new in the air. A tentative sense of progress. Not just in the case, but in my own heart. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was starting to reclaim the pieces of myself that I had lost over the years. It was like a long road was finally coming into view, though it was still shrouded in fog. I had never been one to talk about my emotions much. After everything I had gone through, the loss of my marriage, the constant sacrifices for my children, the years of emotional neglect, I had learned to bottle things up. It was easier that way, or so I thought. But now, after weeks of digging into the past, of sifting through the remnants of my family's betrayal, I had started to understand just how much I had been holding inside. It wasn't just the legal victory I craved. It was a sense of closure, a feeling that I could finally be free from the chains of resentment and self-doubt that had bound me for so long. And yet, there was still a part of me that held on to the pain. A part that hadn't fully let go of what had been taken from me, from all of us. The cottage, the family that I thought I knew, the trust I had put in them. I wanted to move forward. I had to. But there was still so much rawness, so much unfinished business that lingered between us. Donald and Sarah were both reaching out more frequently now, each trying in their own way to rebuild the bridges that had been burned. Donald's calls had become more frequent, his tone more sincere, though I could hear the hesitation in his voice, as if he wasn't sure whether I would accept him back into my life. Sarah, too, had been trying to find her place in the midst of everything, trying to reconcile the daughter she had been with the woman she was now. I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, the cracks in her armor that had been so perfectly constructed over the years. I had always wanted to believe the best in them, but now, after everything, I didn't know if I could ever see them the same way again. And then there was William. He had been quiet since we filed the papers. His lawyers had fought back hard, trying every angle they could think of to discredit my claim to the cottage. But Harriet had been meticulous in her preparation. She had all the evidence we needed, and I had never felt more confident in my decision to stand my ground. William had always been the one to make the rules, to call the shots. But now, I was the one who was calling the shots, and it felt good. But even with all that, I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something, looking out over a vast, uncertain landscape. It wasn't just about the money or the property. It was about the emotional cost of all of it, the weight of betrayal, the loss of trust, the quiet grief that had followed me for so long. One rainy afternoon, as I sat in my study, going over the latest legal documents Harriet had sent me, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I opened it, there stood Donald, looking more like the boy I used to know than the man who had betrayed me. His face was weary, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time, regret. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "can we talk?" I stood there for a moment, caught between the impulse to slam the door in his face and the desire to hear what he had to say. I hadn't been ready to face him, not until now, not until I could find some peace within myself. But something in his voice, the way he stood there, hesitant and vulnerable, made me pause. I stepped aside and let him in. We didn't say much at first, just stood there in the quiet of the living room, the rain tapping softly against the windows. It was as if neither of us knew where to begin, how to bridge the gap that had opened up between us. But then he spoke, his voice low, almost pleading. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything, about what happened, about how I treated you. And I'm sorry. I should have done better. I should have stood by you, not him. And I can't keep pretending like it didn't happen. I can't keep running from it." I swallowed hard, trying to keep the emotions from taking over. It felt like a weight had been lifted, hearing him say those words, but I still wasn't sure if I could forgive him. Not yet. I had to protect myself, too. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Donald," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Not yet. What you did, it hurt more than you'll ever understand. I gave you everything, and you turned your back on me." He nodded, his face crumpling with guilt. "I know, Mom, and I can't undo it. I can't take it back. But I need you to know that I see what I did now. I understand it, and I want to make it right." "Making it right isn't that easy, Donald," I said, my voice faltering. "You can't just say sorry and expect everything to go back to the way it was. This isn't just about the money or the cottage. It's about trust. It's about the years I spent trying to hold this family together, and you just walked away." "I'm not asking for everything to go back to the way it was," he said quickly, his voice full of desperation. "I'm asking for a chance to rebuild, a chance to prove that I can be the son you deserve. I don't want to lose you, Mom. I don't want to lose what we had." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so long feeling abandoned, so long carrying the weight of the hurt they had caused me, that I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone actually fight for me. It was an odd sensation, one I didn't know how to process. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Donald," I said quietly, "but I'm willing to try. For what it's worth, I'm willing to try." He exhaled as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a flicker of the boy I had raised, the one who had looked up to me with love and admiration, the one who had made me believe that family was something you fought for. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, his voice steady now, the determination in his eyes unmistakable. I nodded, the uncertainty still lingering in the air between us, but there was something else there, too. A spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. And with that, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let the past define my future. I wasn't going to let the mistakes of my family keep me trapped in a cycle of bitterness and regret. It was time to move forward, to rebuild, not just my relationship with Donald, but with myself. And so we sat there, in the quiet of the living room, not knowing what would come next, but knowing that we were finally, for the first time in a long time, willing to try. The following days felt like a slow unraveling, a process that was both exhausting and liberating. The legal battle continued, and with every step, I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest, making it harder to breathe. But there was something else now, something shifting deep within me. It was as if, for the first time in years, I was beginning to reclaim the pieces of myself that had been lost, not just in the battle for the cottage, but in the years I had spent giving and sacrificing for everyone else. The strain of constantly being the strong one, the one who held it all together, had finally caught up with me. I couldn't keep doing it. I couldn't keep bending for them, putting them first, while my own needs and desires were pushed aside. I had spent so much of my life holding on to the idea of family. Even after the divorce, I had held on to the hope that we could be a family again, that we could somehow heal and move forward together. But now I was starting to understand that healing doesn't always come in the form you expect. Sometimes it comes from letting go, from accepting that some things, some people are no longer meant to be a part of your life. The phone rang late one afternoon as I sat in the living room, going through the latest legal documents. I recognized the number immediately. It was Sarah. For the first time in weeks, I didn't hesitate to pick up the phone. I had avoided her calls for days, unsure of how to face her, unsure of what to say. But now, I was ready to listen, to understand, to hear her out, even if it meant opening up old wounds. "Mom," she said, her voice tentative, like she was walking on eggshells. "I know we've been through a lot, and I know I've hurt you, but I need to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago." I felt a tightness in my chest, but I didn't interrupt. I just listened. "I've been thinking about everything," she continued. "About the cottage, about the money, about all the things that have happened. And I see it now. I see how I failed you. How I let myself get caught up in what Dad wanted, what Donald wanted, and I didn't stop to think about what you needed. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm really sorry." Her words hit me harder than I expected. A part of me wanted to forgive her immediately, to tell her it was okay, to pretend like everything could go back to the way it was. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt for so long, held back. It wasn't just about the apology. It was about the years of silence, the years of feeling invisible, of being taken for granted. It wasn't enough for her to just say sorry. I needed to see something more. "I appreciate you saying that, Sarah," I said, my voice steady but distant. "But it's not just about the apology. You have to understand, it's about trust. And right now, I'm still trying to figure out if I can trust you again, if I can trust any of you." She was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, I could hear the sadness in her voice. "I understand, Mom, and I know I can't fix everything overnight, but I want to try. I don't want to lose you, not over this." Her words were soft, sincere, and I could hear the desperation in them. It was the kind of desperation I hadn't heard from her in years. And in that moment, I realized something. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally seeing the truth. Maybe she was starting to understand the weight of everything I had carried for so long. "I'm willing to try too," I said, my voice softer now, a crack in the walls I had built around myself. "But it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time, and I need to see that you're ready to fight for this too. For us, because I'm not going to keep putting in all the work if you're not." "I will, Mom," she said quickly. "I swear. I just want to make things right. I'll do whatever it takes." I nodded, though I wasn't sure she could see me. "We'll see, but right now I need some space. I need to focus on what I need to do to get through this, to get through all of this." "I get it, Mom," she replied. "I'll give you the space you need. But I'm here. I'll always be here when you're ready." The call ended with a quiet click, and for a moment I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, letting her words settle in. It wasn't the perfect resolution I had hoped for, but it was a start. A small, fragile start. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next few days were filled with more meetings and more legal back and forth. William's legal team was relentless, trying to push me into a corner, trying to make me give in. But I stood firm. I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Harriet was by my side, offering her usual steady guidance, and I could feel the weight of my decision growing heavier with each passing day. This wasn't just about the cottage anymore. It was about my freedom, my independence, and my peace. It was about the woman I was becoming. The woman who wasn't afraid to stand up for herself, to fight for what was rightfully hers. Then came the moment I had been dreading. The phone call from Donald. His voice was tentative, like he wasn't sure how I would react. "Mom," he began, "I need to talk to you. About everything." I sat up straighter in my chair, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is it, Donald?" He took a deep breath before speaking again. "I know I've messed up. I know I hurt you, and I can't take that back. But I want to make it right. I'm not asking for your forgiveness right away. I know I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I see what I did now, and I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." I closed my eyes, the weight of his words sinking in. I had expected this. I had expected him to apologize. But hearing it from him, hearing the sincerity in his voice, made something inside me shift. The anger, the hurt, all of it started to dissolve, replaced by a quiet sense of understanding. He had been manipulated, just like I had. And now he was finally seeing the truth. "I appreciate your apology, Donald," I said, my voice calm but steady. "But it's going to take more than words. I need to see you back up what you're saying. I need to see that you're truly ready to change." "I am, Mom," he said, his voice urgent. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I know I can't fix the past, but I want to do better. I want to be the son you deserve." I felt the weight of his words, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been broken. But it wasn't going to happen overnight. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was willing to try. "Okay," I said, my voice steady now. "But know this, I'm not going to wait forever. You've got to prove it." "I will, Mom. I promise." As the call ended, I sat there for a while, letting the quiet settle over me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the happy ending I had always hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. And that was enough, for now. The days seemed to blur together as I navigated through the motions of my life. The legal battle was still ongoing, but the heaviness that had been pressing down on me for weeks was starting to lift, just a little. My phone calls with Donald and Sarah had opened up new avenues for communication, but the walls between us were far from being fully torn down. Every conversation felt like a delicate dance, an attempt to bridge the gap that had formed over the years. There was progress, yes, but it was slow, like watching a flower bloom after months of harsh winter. It wasn't easy, but it was something. The most challenging part was realizing that healing doesn't always come with immediate results. I had spent so many years waiting for my family to change, fast, for them to wake up and realize the weight of their actions. But now, I understood something much more important. I was the one who needed to change. I was the one who needed to let go of the resentment, the anger, and the hurt that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. I had to stop carrying that weight on my own. I had to forgive, not for them, but for myself. I couldn't keep punishing myself for the past. It was time to move forward. The battle for the cottage continued, though. William's legal team was relentless, throwing everything they could at me in an attempt to discredit my claim. But I had Harriet on my side, and together, we pushed back. I knew the truth was on my side, and that gave me a sense of strength I hadn't felt in a long time. Still, there were moments when the emotional toll of it all would hit me, and I would find myself questioning whether it was all worth it. The legal system was slow and exhausting, and I was left with the constant reminder of what had been taken from me. The weight of it hung over me, but I was determined not to let it break me. One morning, as I sat in my study, going over the latest batch of legal documents, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Sarah. My heart skipped a beat as I read the words on the screen. "Mom, I know things haven't been easy, but I want to talk. I'm coming over this afternoon. Please, can we have a real conversation?" I stared at the message for a long moment, my mind racing. I hadn't heard from her in a while, not in the way I wanted to. I wasn't sure what to expect, but the fact that she was reaching out, asking for a real conversation, gave me a sliver of hope. I didn't know if I was ready for it, but I also knew that if we were going to move forward, this was the kind of conversation that needed to happen. When Sarah arrived later that afternoon, I found myself struggling to keep my emotions in check. She looked different somehow, her face more mature, more worn. The girl I had raised seemed to have vanished, replaced by a woman who had gone through her own set of trials. She walked into the living room slowly, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice soft. Soft. "Can we sit down?" I nodded, motioning for her to take a seat. My heart was pounding in my chest, the familiar ache of anticipation settling deep within me. What was she going to say? What was she really thinking? I couldn't help but wonder if this conversation would be another attempt at reconciliation, or if it would be another empty apology, another attempt to patch things up without truly facing the depth of what had happened. We sat there in silence for a few moments, the weight of the years between us hanging in the air. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the way her hands fidgeted in her lap. It was clear she didn't know where to begin, just like I didn't. But I had to remind myself that this wasn't about me. This was about her, about us, about trying to rebuild the shattered pieces of our relationship. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said finally, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "About what happened with the cottage, with Dad and Donald, and with you. I've realized that I've been running from all of it, running from the truth, and I don't want to do that anymore." I sat back in my chair, my heart racing. I wasn't sure how to respond. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she was ready to face everything that had been swept under the rug for so long. But my trust, the trust that had been broken over and over again, was hard to restore. I needed to hear her say the words, to see the sincerity in her actions, not just in her words. "I know I've hurt you, Mom," she continued, her voice wavering slightly. "I know I haven't been there for you in the way I should have. I got caught up in everything, in my own life, in what Dad wanted, in what I thought was best for me. But I see it now. I see how much I took you for granted. And I'm sorry. I don't expect everything to go back to normal right away, but I want to try. I want to rebuild what we had." Her words were raw, vulnerable, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like she was being honest with me. There was no hiding, no defensiveness, just a genuine desire to make things right. My chest tightened as I tried to process everything she was saying. Could I trust her again? Could I trust any of them? "Sarah," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion, "I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. But I'm willing to try. I want to believe you, I do. But it's going to take time. It's going to take more than just words. It's going to take actions. You can't just say sorry and expect everything to be fixed." "I understand," she said softly. "I know I can't fix it all with a single conversation. I'm not asking for that. But I want you to know that I'm here and I want to do the work. I want to earn back your trust if you'll let me." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the resolution I had been hoping for, but it was something. It was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a small flicker of hope. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I wasn't alone in it anymore. "I'm willing to try too," I said, my voice steady but full of uncertainty. "But you have to understand that this isn't going to be easy. It's going to take time, Sarah. It's going to take time for me to heal, for me to trust again. But if you're willing to put in the work, so am I." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I am, Mom. I swear. I just want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed her. It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it was a start. And sometimes that's all you need, a start. In life, it's essential to recognize your own worth and to prioritize self-care, especially when it feels like you're always putting others first. Holding on to resentment or avoiding difficult conversations only prolongs the pain. The key is to confront the truth, both about yourself and others. Healing takes time, but it starts with making the choice to put yourself first, even if it means facing uncomfortable truths or breaking ties with people who have taken you for granted. Trust, once broken, can be hard to rebuild, but it starts with vulnerability and the willingness to take small steps forward. Don't be afraid to set boundaries, and don't feel guilty for demanding respect and accountability from the people you love. True healing comes from understanding that you can't change others, but you can control how you respond. Surround yourself with people who truly see you, who value you for who you are, and who are willing to put in the effort to make things right. Let go of what no longer serves you, whether that's relationships, past regrets, or old habits, and embrace the freedom of creating a life that reflects your true worth.